Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. Today I'm going to be covering one of my absolute favorite games from the PS1. That game in question is Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and I'm going to talk about what made it fun and why you should check it out. So let's take a trip back to 1997. Castlevania Symphony of the Night was one of those games I used to see in the stores such as Toys R Us, Software Etc., Electronics Boutique, Babbage's, all the game stores from the 90s, but I never really knew what it was. I just knew the box art and then it looked kind of like Dracula, and that's all I knew. It wasn't until the N64 though when I finally figured out what this game was and how much of a history it had. More on the N64 game in a future episode. But it wasn't until 2001 when I finally picked this game up at my local Blockbuster when they were getting rid of their old games to basically make room for the PS2, Xbox, and the GameCube. Symphony of the Night was the first game I played that gave me that true 2D Castlevania feel, because when I first played this game in 2001, we didn't have all the fancy collections that we have now, such as the Anniversary Collection or the Requiem Collection on PS4, or the PSP Dracula X Chronicles Collection. But it was also the first time I played a game that was a Metroidvania title, because I had not played a Metroid game before this, so I didn't know how that was set up or how the gameplay style was for those games and how the map worked, which I will talk about in the gameplay section of this video. This game would also be a sequel to not one, but two previous Castlevania games, acting as a bridge between Rondo of Blood as well as Castlevania 3, which a lot of fans praise as one of the best games in the series up to this point. But let's get into some gameplay and see what made this game fun. As I mentioned before, the game is pretty much the first Castlevania to fully explore RPG elements such as leveling up your character and fighting enemies at a higher level than yourself. Now, some would say that this was the precursor to Bloodborne because the two games share this similar gameplay style, and a lot of people have compared Bloodborne to the Castlevania series because of how similar in gameplay it is. Now, some would also argue that Castlevania 2 was actually the first one to feature this whole setup of going to a merchant, collecting items, going to fight enemies, collecting the Dracula parts just to bring him back to life to destroy him. Because yes, there is a spot in Castlevania Symphony of the Night where you do have to collect the Dracula parts again, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But it wasn't until Symphony of the Night when fans really had an appreciation for that style of gameplay, because at the time we were only used to linear Castlevania games, and a lot of people didn't like Castlevania 2 as much as the first game or even the third game from the NES. They just did not like what Konami tried to do with it, and they just shunned it and pushed it aside for the other games instead. But it wasn't until this game, like I said, where they had a better appreciation for that setup. One of the new mechanics that I did actually enjoy in this game were the familiars that can help you in your journey. The two that I used the most were the fairy, because she'll come through and heal your character while you're going through the levels and fighting enemies and bosses and everything. Because normally you would have to hit the pause menu, go to the items, equip a potion, use the potion, and then equip your sword back, which can take a lot of time to do, especially if you're in a really heated battle against a boss or something. She'll just heal you right then and there, but you kind of want to be careful because she'll end up using up all your healing items and healing potions before you can even blink. So you want to be careful of that and try not to have her use too many of them. I believe she only uses the potions though. I don't think she uses any of like the pot roast or chicken or teas or anything that you might have healing wise in your items that are food. I don't think she can use those. Now the other familiar that I liked using was the demon familiar, because he has a poker and he'll see buttons in the distance that you can't reach or get to, and he'll say something like, "Don't worry, I've got this," and he'll go push that button, open up a secret door, and give you a bunch of items to collect that you can use for boss fights and just on enemies. I prefer to use them on the bosses, mainly Dracula at the end of the game. I prefer to use all of these special items on him because his boss fight's so ridiculous and pretty difficult at times. When it comes to the combat in this game, this is where it can feel like an RPG game the most. As you go through the game, you will find a huge amount of weapons that you can use to fight tougher enemies by seeing how much damage they will cause towards each enemy. But I do recommend, if you're going to want to fight tougher enemies, try and go for the Chrysogrim, which you won't get until the inverted castle in the inverted library. That's pretty much the only place you can get it. There's an enemy called the Shmoo, and it's a very rare drop, so it's kind of sort of going to be a little bit of a grind to get that sword. I have done it many times, and it took me anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes just to get that sword. But it is very helpful. Yes, it does break the game, but it will kill some enemies in one hit, and it will kill bosses pretty quickly, especially Dracula. I know I'm bringing up the Dracula boss fight again, but this sword definitely helped with that boss fight. Now, the first time I ever played this game, and up to about 2007, I had no idea what the heck a crisogrim was. Had I gotten the sword when I originally played it in 2001, I wouldn't have even known because I wasn't using any of the other swords. I was using the alucard sword. Once I got that one again, I was using that one for the rest of the game because of how powerful it was in the beginning. Now, this crisogrim is good for a first-time player, but I recommend the death glitch. What I mean by the death glitch is at the beginning of the game, when you start playing as alucard, there's a spot you go into a room and Death comes to talk to you asking, hey, what are you doing here? And then he'll take all of your weapons away, basically like a Metroid game where they take all your weapons away and you have to find everything again. So he takes all of your weapons away, but there's a glitch where you can basically keep them. And I did cover this in a previous tutorial episode where in the Requiem collection, at least, you go through the door and then quickly back up and you'll get the music to stop, and once the music stops, you know the glitch is working. So if you definitely want to check out that episode, I have a link to it down below so you can see what that one's about. But keep in mind, it only works in the Requiem collection with that method, and I believe it only works in the PSP version as well with that method. If you're trying to go for it in the original game, you have to input the luck code, which you have to complete the game first to get that option to use the luck code, and then it's a completely different way to get the weapons to stay. It's a little more complicated in that method if you ask me. Now, I know I'm circling back to Castlevania 2 with this one, but the game does feature a merchant in the form of the librarian. He is very helpful throughout your playthrough of the game, and he'll sell you everything from potions to uncursed to anti-venoms to high elixirs to weapons to basically everything you can get in the game. Now, the two items you want to get from him at the start when you first meet him are the Jewel of Open, which will help you get through the game in certain parts because there are two doors that are locked unless you get that Jewel of Open, and one of them leads to the Royal Chapel, which is a story level, and another one leads to a platform that you have to push down to open up another section of the map. And another thing he does sell that is very helpful is the castle map. Now, I believe he only sells one. So once you buy that one castle map, it will actually show you every area that you need to explore. And as you explore those areas, you'll find more areas that are hidden and breakable walls that are in the similar areas that you need to open up to get the secret areas. So I recommend getting both of those items. But also, as you go through the game, you will pick up gems and jewels that will help you basically sell to him and give you high amounts of money or low amounts of money depending on how rare the gems and jewels are. Some of them are very rare and you only come across them maybe once or twice. I believe the diamond I've only seen at least once. The onyx I think I saw twice, but your uncommon ones you'll find all over the place, like your zircons and things like that. You'll find them all over the place. So just sell them, and if you want to, basically carry a bunch of them at once. So if you want to get 2 or 3 zircons and then sell them all at once, go ahead and do that. I believe you can sell weapons to him as well, but I never really messed around with that. I didn't care to sell him my weapons. Unlike the DS Castlevania games, I really didn't care to sell my weapons for more money. I'd rather just keep them with me because I don't believe you get any duplicates of swords in Symphony of the Night. I think it's just one sword and that's it. But there are, like I said, a vast amount of swords in this game. The map is huge for a first-time player. I am not going to lie about that one. It might seem like a lot, but I promise you it is worth exploring every bit of this castle. Also, you really want to get those holy glasses, which is why you kind of need to get that Jewel of Open. This leads us into the environment on why you need to get the holy glasses. Now, one thing that was very interesting when this game first released was that a lot of people got the bad ending and didn't quite understand why. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But first I want to go over the castle as a whole. This game would feature a lot of areas seen in previous Castlevania games, only you travel from room to room in order to get to the clock tower or the Royal Chapel, whereas in the old games it would just transport you from level to level and you wouldn't see what was going on in between each level, and people always ask, well, what's going on between these levels, because you see a lot of stuff on the map. And this game pretty much answers that question and throws you into those areas, and even expands some areas such as Dracula's Castle, which you get to see more of in this game compared to the original Castlevania, where it was just a little bit here and there. They really went all out in this game though, and a lot of areas can be revisited to farm for money or health potions or just weapon drops such as the crisogrim that I mentioned earlier, similar to Metroid, where you can revisit areas to get missile drops and health pickups and everything like that. Now I'll say it again, but this map is very, very huge. And about that bad ending though, which plays into the map, many fans of this game had no idea that there was a second castle upon their first playthrough, and they just thought that was the end of the game because they didn't get the holy glasses. And this item really helps you with a boss fight about midway through the game. It basically transports you to the inverted castle, or the upside down castle as we call it. This is essentially a second game if you consider it as that, because you'll have to traverse through all the areas again, but with more difficult enemies and more difficult bosses. Now I must circle back to the holy glasses again though, as this is not the only item that can affect gameplay and the environment. There are multiple item pickups that, if they are missed, you might miss huge chunks of the game and certain story elements, because certain items do affect certain areas of the castle. Much like in the middle of the clock tower, the middle of the marble gallery, there's that giant clock, and there are some items you pick up that you can only get to certain areas within that room by getting these items. So you definitely want to keep an eye out for anything and everything that you can pick up. Now lastly, I must mention the bosses, and I wanted to save them for this segment because I always felt that they were a big part of each area that you visit in the game, with some being unique to their areas. Though don't let their size fool you, because some of the smaller bosses can pack a mean punch, whereas some of the bigger bosses can put up pretty much an easy fight and be defeated in no time basically. Now that we've talked about the environment, I wanted to bring up one last thing that I love about this game, and that is the music, and I think we can all agree on this game having some great music in it. Castlevania has always been known for its awesome soundtrack, with songs such as Bloody Tears and Vampire Killer from the original games that many fans know and love. But Symphony of the Night has some of the best music in the series as well, and many fans have praised it as one of the best game soundtracks of all time. A few of my favorite tracks in the game would have to be the prologue at the very beginning of the game when you're playing as Richter Belmont, Dracula's castle when you first take control of Alucard, Law's painting in the Upside Down Castle, as well as the Royal Chapel and the confessional area within the Royal Chapel, because they are very 90s, and the music in this game is 90s at its best, and I love every minute of it in this game. Now, one of the coolest parts about this, and a lot of PS1 games did this, where if you had the disc, you can actually pop it into a CD player and listen to the entire soundtrack. I know Mortal Kombat Trilogy did that, and I believe Die Hard Trilogy did it as well, and Alien Trilogy. But the funny part about this one is there is a track where Alucard says, "Hey, stop. This contains data that's crucial to the disc in the game, so should you listen to it, you might mess it up. But you're not going to listen to me anyways," and the song plays anyways, so I thought that was really funny that they added that in there. But as we come to the end of the episode, guys, I would like to give my final thoughts on this game and what I think about it today. This game is definitely worth playing today just as much as it was back then. I don't think I'll ever get tired of playing this game, and I think it's a great game to play for new fans of this series. Just know that it is a lengthy game the first time around, and you will have a little bit of trouble getting through the map if you're not familiar with games that have that map set up similar to Metroid. Now, when it comes to physical copies of this game, it is highly expensive, and I have always been skeptical on buying it. It's always been high at price because of how limited the game was when they released it. However, it is available on multiple digital formats such as the Xbox 360 Arcade, which is also compatible with the Xbox One and Xbox Series X. It is also available on PS3 through the PSN and the PS4 through the Requiem Collection, as well as the PSP version should you find that on the PSN. I believe it is still available on the PSN, but a physical copy of that game is also very expensive, and that one is called the Dracula X Chronicles that I mentioned before. Very hard to come by that game, but should you find it for a decent price, definitely pick it up, because it is worth playing that game on the go, especially for the Rondo of Blood remake. Now, like I said, the game is readily available across multiple platforms, and if you're wanting to play it on the go, then I would definitely recommend just the one that's on the PSN or even the mobile version, which I heard is kind of hit or miss. But with that being said, as we come to the end of the episode, I want to know, what is your favorite moment in Castlevania Symphony of the Night? What is your favorite Castlevania game? Let me know down in the comments below. I would like to thank you again for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed this episode. I always enjoy making these videos because it gives me a chance to revisit the past and introduce these older games to a newer audience who might be interested in trying them out for themselves. But it also gives me a chance to bring back the memories to those older fans who used to play these games back in the 90s and early 2000s, such as myself. But as always, guys, be sure to hit that thumbs up and ring that bell to be notified of when videos go live. Share with your friends and family, and I'll see you next time.